to the second half of this conference. Today we have a special session entirely dedicated to the seminar on Indo-Portuguese history, an ongoing project of almost 50 years. The title of this session is the International Seminar on Indo-Portuguese History and its impact in world historiography. So I have here with me the coordinators of this ongoing project. To my left, I have Professor João Paulo Oliveira Costa. João Paulo Oliveira Costa is a historian, a novelist, and a professor. He completed his BA in History, his MA in History of Portuguese Expansion, and his PhD with a dissertation on Bishop Dom Luís Cerqueira's mission in Japan. Since 1990, he has taught at the Department of History, offering courses on Portuguese overseas expansion, the early stages of globalization, ancient Asian civilizations, and global history. He also coordinates the UNESCO chair, the Oceans Heritage. He's a visiting professor at the Universidad Pablo de Olavide in Seville, and has lectured at universities across all continents. His research focuses on the 15th and 16th century Portugal, the Estado da Índia, the religious history, and early Japanese-Portuguese encounters. He coordinated several FCT-funded projects and later expanded his work to global history and deep history. He authored biographies of Manuel I and Henry the Navigator and co-authored the comprehensive volume of História da Expansão e do Império Português. His historical essay, Portugal na História, Uma Identidade, received 2 awards in 2023. He also led the EU-funded project called Concha, involving researchers from Europe, Africa, and the Americas. He is also the author of 8 historical novels, published between 2008 and 2023. And to my far left, I have Prof Ernestine Carreira. Ernestine Carreira is a maître de conférence and head of the Department of Portuguese and Brazilian Studies at the Aix-Marseille University. Aix-Marseille University. She is a former student of the École Normale Supérieure de Fontenay, Saint-Claude. She holds the agrégation in Portuguese and a PhD in history from the PhD in history from the École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales, Paris. She coordinates the Eduardo Lourenço Chair and serves on the Council of the Portuguese Consulate in Marseille. She's a full member of CNRS Research Center, EMAF. She has organized numerous international conferences and seminars, including the International Seminar of Indo-Portuguese History, in collaboration with Fundação Gulbenkian, CHAM, and the universities of Lisbon, Paris, and Goa. Her research explores the Portuguese presence in Asia and Africa, notably Goa and Mozambique, from the 17th to the 19th century. Among her publications are Globalizing Goa and contributions to the Nova História da Expansão Portuguesa and O Estado da Índia e a Costa Oriental Africana. Thank you so much for coming here, and I will give you the word so that you can present this historical project. Yeah.
So thank you very much, Dr. João Ribeirete. I will start We decided not to make two presentations, but a single presentation that we are speaking one and another according to the themes we have chosen. First is to thank, in my personal name also, to Dr. João Paulo, to Ambassador João Ribeiro de Almeida for the invitation. It is for us very important to participate in this conference about the 50th anniversary of the restarting of the relationships, diplomatic relations between our countries, Portugal and India, and it is a great pleasure. I would say that personally, it's the fourth time that I have a conference here in the facilities of the Indian International Center, and the first one, it was in 1989. It was a long time ago. When here we met each other when we participated in the 5th seminar that was in Cochin. But there was a meeting first here in Delhi, and it was here in the Indian International Center. We have slept here also. And then I came back in 2013 for the 12th seminar that took place in these facilities, led by Latika Varadarajan. And 3 years ago, I came again here to make the first conference, the opening session of the seminar about the encounter between Japan and India in the 16th century, and that was a Portuguese that was to introduce that due to precisely all this, the history of the Portuguese in the Indian Ocean. So it's a great pleasure also to be in such a center that is very important for me. So just to say that we didn't start these seminars, but we are close to the founders of this seminar, European founders, of course, then we come back to the Indians. But just to mention 3 persons that were our professors, Luís Filipe Tomás and Luís Albuquerque were my professors when this started, and Geneviève Bouchon, who was particularly professor from Prof Ernestine, but also my professor because Geneviève Bouchon teaches also in Lisbon. And so they just to mention that they were the three of the founders of these seminars. And this seminar was a challenge that was presented by the first Portuguese ambassador in India, that asked to the academics to make something that now that relationships had been restarted. And it is very important. It was very important because Academy answered yes by Luís Albuquerque, and at that time José Pereira da Costa, who was the director of the National Archives in Lisbon, and Father Correia Afonso from Agoese who was in Bombay, and so they started. And I don't know. I'm sure that none of them could imagine that 50 years later, the students would following. Because from all of those people who were of the founders, I think that just 2 are alive, but out of Anthony Disney, with whom we don't have many connections for a long time, and Luís Filipe Tomás are those. I think these are both who are still alive, but they didn't participate in the last seminar last year in Goa. But I'm sure that none of them could believe that they were inaugurating a series that is very rare because it is not organized by a university, it is not organized by association, but by something more fluid that we are managing to keep going as we expect to present during this presentation. So,
okay. Well, first I want to apologize for my non-academic English. I hope you'll understand me. In the academic circles of historiography on the Indian Ocean, the Indo-Portuguese International Seminary today represent a model of success for its longevity, scientific results, and operating model, which, despite big conflicts of ideas of its members, built a solid and solidary group as early as 1978, with today a total of 3 generations of researchers in various disciplinary areas. In a total, in about 50 years, of more than 600 associated researchers. Some of them permanent, as us, others who accompanied 2-3 colloquia, others who participated occasionally due to the coming of the colloquium in their country or in their state. It was the case of Delhi in '98, for example. and others, finally, the so-called local scholars, the precious collaborators who hold the local memory. And we begin with a presentation of the first seminary, the political presentation, because one of the characteristics of all the 16 seminaries was the collaboration between the scientific institutions and the foreign affairs of India, Portugal, and France, occasionally. The first seminary, as João Paulo Costa was saying, was founded by Professor John Correa Afonso, director of Erasmus Institute of the University of Bombay. But it was not an initiative of academic circles. It was an initiative of Foreign Affairs of India, of Portuguese ambassador of Delhi, and of Brazilian ambassador in Delhi, and with the collaboration of the Chief Minister of Goa. It was the first time we had all that members of political institutions together to ask. It was a request to John Correa Afonso, and John Correa Afonso contacted later all the Portuguese institutions and the most important professors in that area.
So, for what I'd like to show you now is the first reflection on the first 4 seminars. The first 4 seminars, these are the participants in the first one. So now our founders of this seminar. Maybe Pierre-Yves Mangan also is alive still, fortunately. So, but the first theme, and I think it was very important, it was about sources. It's important to say that 50 years ago, historiography was a little bit different from nowadays. There were much less historians than today, and so most of the historians did work with chronicles, and and they discussed chronicles, and they tried to understand which was the chronicle who was right, and then sometimes none of them is right because chronicles, are not documentation. And what we came across the documentation, and it was very important because this first seminar was about sources, so it was how to restart. We are restarting our engagement because after that hostility, the hostility was ended, so we could come across this history was solved, and now we are going to learn about history together, and that's what we have done in the last 50 years. So it was about that was the conference where were more people from the archives. They are always, but in that time, the archivists were the first protagonists of this encounter, because they had to show which was in Portugal, in the archives of Goa, and so on. Among the most important scholars, I would quote, also Charles Boxer, who was the great historian in the Portuguese perspective, who was a great historian about Portuguese colonial history at that time, who was a man already of the documentation, not of the chronicles, and Michael Pearson, that was also it was also mentioned yesterday. Michael Pearson from the Indian Ocean side was the great changer. Ashin Dasgupta also, it was very important at that time, and he was in several of our seminars at the beginning. But Michael Pearson was one of the most eminent scholars that, and I owe to him that after my first participation in India, he invited me to other conference. So it was a generous academic that was something that we now try to do, because we were both very young when we started these seminars. And since we started here, many other people like Michael Pearson, like George Vinius, and some others, Anthony Disney, all them invited to their countries to go there. We started we are very fortunate, both and other colleagues, because we had this group of professors. So they made the first seminar, and they decided we have to do another one, and they moved to Lisbon in 1980. In 1980, it was about from everything that was discussed. I think that is a seminar. There is a seminal idea that brought from the presentation at that seminar of Luís Filipe Tomás, who made his paper was about how the Estado da India is a network, is a maritime network, not a territorial empire, but a network. So this idea existed, of course, but he for example, he had been in Paris with Denis Lombard. Denis Lombard was a great historian for the Southeast Asian history and for China history. But the idea of a network in the archipelago, in Malay archipelago, was then thought by Luís Filipe Tomás for the Estado da Índia, so explaining that the reason of the different places is not in land, is in the seas. And this is something that is nowadays very common, everybody to speak about networks and about networks. This idea of the Estado da Índia as a maritime network, but it was a novelty, absolute novelty, speaking about the Estado da Índia at that time. And in 1983, so it worked well. It worked well, and as it worked well, they decided to come back to Goa. And they made a third one, which was the last one I didn't participate. I started in the fourth. So that was, again, in Goa, where two major discussions, two major novelties about our historiography is about the Shadow Empire. That was also spoken by Lakshmi yesterday. So the Shadow Empire was discussed, and one of the first great historians about that, it was George Winius. George Winius was an American professor that then, but he was a professor in Leiden, in the Netherlands, and he was a great friend. And he died in Portugal. Now, and his final days, he moved to Portugal, and he lived in Portugal until his death. So George Winius brought us the Shadow Empire, and at the same time, Artur Teodoro de Matos, the most close friend and collaborator of Luís Filipe Tomás, or vice versa, it depends, was the full professor with whom I worked. Artur Teodoro de Matos emphasized another point. It was fighting about this idea of the very quick decadency of the Portuguese Empire, which is not that he demonstrated that it was not true for Estado da Índia in the 16th century, and later I demonstrated it was not true for the empire as a whole. But because it was in that conference that Teodoro de Matos studied the budgets of the Estado da Índia, and he proved that until the fall of Hormuz in 1622, the Estado da Índia had resources, Asian resources, to survive with the superavit budgets. Then, of course, that the unexpected expenses could make debts, but the revenues of the Estado da Índia from land, already from land, but mostly from trade, maritime trade, made a very solid entity, Asian entity, until ruled by European elite, until the fall of Hormuz, until 1622. Finally, they kept going back to Lisbon, and in Lisbon, what we had different in 1985, it was that for the first time, the emphasis, that the focus was only in the 16th century, because it was very close in the 17th century, especially by Anthony Disney, it was raised as a new period of understanding. So the 4 first seminars were general ideas. So there was no theme. It was about Indo-Portuguese history. And every theme could be accepted, and everybody was coming for these seminars. But when they arrived to the 4th, they realized that it was time to make something. If they wanted to keep going on, it should not be only this ping pong between Goa and Lisbon, and they should make something different. It was created at that time a structure that still exists today, which is how we work. It is an international committee and a panel of advisors. The international committee has 2 Indians, 2 Portuguese, and 2 non-Portuguese, nor 2 others. And the advisory board is with the seniors that are going they make direct orders, but they still influence very, very well. So after these 4 seminars that were, broadly speaking, so the beginning, so it was where we started the first ideas, and we moved to another life of the seminar with a structure that was not controlled by anybody, that meant by the participants themselves, and to another new idea that after twice in Goa, twice in Lisbon, we should go to other places, and it was chosen at that time that the 5th seminar would be in Cochin. But now Ernestine is going to speak about the structure of the seminar, and then I came back to about the historiography evolution.
Just a quick presentation about the partners institution, because that seminars, it would be impossible to maintain during half a century all that seminars without partners institution, universities, and sponsoring. And has university institutional support and university partners. We presented here only the most important, the universities who organize the seminars, but many other universities, we have today more than 130 universities in the world who collaborated along these 50 years. The most important for all that years, the most important was at first the Eras Institute in Bombay, because the University of Goa was created only in 1997, and the Eras Institute formed all the first generation of Goan historians. And Father Correa Afonso created that first seminar. He organized the first, in India, the first seminars until '89. And they created the the Xavier College for Historical Research in Goa, who was the first building of research dedicated to the seminar and to research. And the Xavier Center for Historical Research co-organized the seminars until 2004. In other creation, you have Portugal, of course, University of Lisbon, first University of Lisbon. After the Universidade Nova de Lisboa, a new University of Lisbon, João Paulo, Costa, Luís Filipe Tomás, Artur Teodoro de Matos, we have a changing of university, and investigação, a Junta de Investigação, o Instituto de Investigação Científica Tropical, who is like a French NRS, is an institution of research. And the Junta de Investigações Científica Tropical has worked with us until, I think, 94, maybe. And of course, Catholic University later. And in France, we begin with École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales, Professor Geneviève Bouchon, who was one of the founders. Denis Lombard, who was present in the first and other seminars. And after 2010, in University of Aix, we begin to have the responsibility of the French part of that seminars. We have other universities who participated, as La Trobe University with Professor Anthony Disney, who was founder, and Anthony Disney participated until 2013, I think. The last one was in Delhi. And Brazil institutions, especially the Marine Ministry of Navy, Oxford, but Oxford, it was in the beginning. After that, we have institutional support. It was very important for us, of course. Fundação Gulbenkian, Fundação Orient, who was working, who co-organized with us the last seminar in 2024 in Goa. And of course, today, since 2018, in Europa, the financement are coming from laboratories. Laboratories, it's more difficult to have sponsoring because the laboratories and the universities take care of the financement of that kind of meetings. The creation of concept is maybe, João Paulo, esta é a tua parte.
Okay, so now we come back to see how these seminars evolved, historiographically speaking. So as I told you, we moved to another way of organizing them. Again, always one time in India, one time in Portugal, or sometimes in other extra countries, but not focused only in Lisbon or only in Goa. It's important to say. It's important to say also.
Pode continuar.
Posso continuar? So it's also important to say that when it started, as you can imagine, the first in India, the first group of people who were most committed with these seminars were the Catholic Goans, by all the reasons, of course, because it was part of their own history, and because they were more close to the Portuguese reading in Portuguese sources. But then we moved to another groups, and among those scholars who participated already in these, mainly in the third and the fourth seminar, it was a guy called Sanjay Subramaniam, who was one of our participants more devoted until the end of the 90s. And it's important because Sanjay was also very informed. First, speaking about Cochin, in Cochin, it was the idea that we were able to do things also beyond Goa and Lisbon, and it was very important because then we studied the interactions with Kerala. It was we situated the Kerala issues in the Estado da Índia at that time. Then we moved to Macau. In 1991, from the Portuguese side, we did it in Macau. At that time, Macau was still under Portuguese administration. And it's interesting because in 1991, when this seminar took place, Sanjay Subramaniam brought with him his new book about the Estado da Índia from the 16th and 17th centuries. And that book of Sanjay was for sure also a result of all the interaction that he established in Portugal during the long stays he had there in the 80s and in the 90s. It was very, very common to meet him anywhere in Portugal at that time. And because it was a book that is a kind of mirror of what we had done all together, because it was a book that showed how the history of Estado da Índia must be told by an Asian perspective, explaining that, as I agree also, of course, that to understand, to explain why the Portuguese did so, or why the Portuguese were there, why the Portuguese were out of there, the explanation is always Asian. And that's the emphasized about, especially in the beginning of 17th century, with the rise of the Mughals, with the rise of the Safavids, with the rise of the Tokugawa in Japan, and the rise of, and then a little bit later with the conquest of China by the Manchu, the Qin dynasty. So all these Asian powers were decisive to the shift of the Estado da Índia, and even for the balance between the Portuguese and the Dutch, that most of the times was a decision from the Asian powers, much more than by the fight of the Europeans. That is in his book. That is something that is very solid for without what we were doing, and we kept doing until today at that time. But so is a remarkable. And then, as we had seen how the Estado da Índia had this history in Kerala, in 1991 we studied how the Estado da Índia had these interactions with the China Sea and the East Asia as a whole. Then in 1994 we were supposed to do it in Daman, but at the last minute it was not possible to do it in Daman by difficulty to arrange facilities for all the people, and we came back to Goa. And the great person at that time is Teutónio de Souza, already also dead, unfortunately. So Teutónio de Souza was the organizer of the great conference in Goa, where the great new theme that emerged was history of art. So it was when some art historians came from in a very, very organized way, especially Rafael Moreira, who passed away this year. But Rafael Moreira brought with him all these ideas and so history of art. It was a great new theme. It's important to say that in this period of the 90s, we did seminars almost every 2 years, because it was a time of in Portuguese say fat cows, vacas gordas. So there was money. There was money because we had in Portugal the National Commission for the Celebration of the Discoveries, which had a lot of money, so we could do it every 2 years.
We just have a glimpse about something who is important for us in all that seminars is the presence of feminine participation and the creation of a generation of Indian historians, feminine historians, and we have the first one. And after, in each seminar, after the first seminar, progressively, we have the participation of more and more. In the seminars of 90s, we have something like 30% feminine presence in the seminars, who was really new for that kind of disciplinary.
Last year, they were the majority.
Yeah. It's just to show you the pictures. In the first one, we have only one Goan historian, Selma Vieira Velho, and Dr. Dlotika Varadarajana. And after that, everything changed after the 5th seminar of Cochin. Really, it's a big changing. And sorry.
Okay. So Then in 1994, you must confess that we conspired. And what happened in the 21st century, it was decided by us, because we are growing, and we were already with responsibilities in our universities, and we viewed what we have achieved, fortunately, from 2006 onwards. And there is a picture that you emerged that we are both there 30 years ago. That is funny to see, to see today. So then in 1996, we went to, in Portuguese side, not Lisbon, but we went to Açores. It's an archipelago, as you know, and it was very important, and our theme there was the Cape Route. So the Cape Route has been studied several times. It is very important for us. It was in articulation also with this CEPCEP. It was a Center for Portuguese Studies of the Catholic University. And then in 1996, you had one of our most difficulties. It was to decide where to do the next one, because next one would be in 1998. In 1998 it would be in India, but in 1998 we were celebrating the 500th anniversary of the arrival of Vasco da Gama in India, and it was not celebrated from the same way by everybody, because the effects were different from the different perspectives. And we had a huge discussion in 1996. It was a huge one, but I was there, about where to do it. And there were two possibilities: to do it in Cochin, not in Calicut, because in Calicut there were no celebrations. Even in Goa they would be difficult, but the discussion was to do it again in Kerala, as you had in 1989, or to move by the influence of Lotika Varadarajan to here, to Delhi. And it was a difficult decision, but finally I think we took the best one, because in 1998 it was here in Delhi that we celebrated the 500th anniversary as a national event and not as a local one. And Lotika Varadarajan also opened the seminar that was very close to history in this more classic idea, to other themes like sciences, like I can't say, but it was a huge discovery, and Lotika Varadarajan brought to the seminar new blood, new people that was, and she was decisive, and I think it was, I should say, the best celebration of those 5th anniversary. It was what took place here in Delhi during a few days. It was very... Then it was our side to choose, and again, not in Portugal, in the continent of Portugal. We moved to Brazil, 2000, because the 500th anniversary also of the Portuguese arrival to Brazil, and I pay my homage to the Admiral Max Just Guedes. Max Just Guedes was, he's not a founder, but he came to the second seminar, and he kept coming until he died. And Max Just Guedes organized in Salvador da Bahia the seminar of 2000. It was very important from a historiographical point of view, because we were doing history of Estado da Índia without the Atlantic, and we placed the Atlantic also in the history of Estado da Índia. It's very interesting, because my Brazilian colleagues, when I started in the 80s the research, there were a few Brazilian scholars who did 18th century Brazil. Then, step by step, they went back to the 17th and to the 16th century. And at that time, they started realizing, when they were doing in 17th and the 16th century, that they had that they were not alone, and that Brazil was connected with a big, in this great empire, maritime empire, and they realized that they could not explain correctly the history of Brazil without India. And what happened in this seminar, that happened in the Brazilian universities. I'm not telling that it was a direct connection, but it is in the same time that we do a seminar in Brazil, that Brazilian historiography by Fátima Gouveia, Maria Fernanda Bicalho, and other scholars from Rio de Janeiro particularly, that realized how to introduce India to explain 16th century and 17th century Brazilian history was important. So I remember that I was in Ouro Preto before going to the seminar in Salvador, and they served me sugar with nutmeg. That was something that I hadn't seen anywhere in the world, except in Brazil, but it was coming from the Moluccas, so from here. So in 2003 we came back to Goa. It was Fatima Gracias who was the responsible for that event. It was the 25th anniversary. It was 25 years ago, more or less. So, okay, well, almost 25 years ago. And then something that Ernestine showed, it's very interesting also to note that most of the front pages of the books of the proceedings were with European maps. Whatever it were organized by the Indian side or Portuguese side, But from the 2006 onwards, it was from Indian motives. The motives of the front pages changed it to Indian. The first is a Mughal image. In 2006, we discussed it. We went back to Lisbon. It was the sole time that we went back to Lisbon, and in Lisbon we discussed the relationship between the Estado da Índia and Europe. So, because also that's important to see not only the rivalries, the European rivalries in the Indian Ocean, but also all the diplomacy. And then in 2010, as we had expected since 1994 both, we did it in Aix-en-Provence under the organization of Ernestine Carreira. And then the two issues that were important, it was that we studied now Estado da Índia and its connections with the Mediterranean Sea. So it was in Aix-en-Provence. In Aix-en-Provence is close to the archives, the French archives of the Indian companies. So it was in the proper place also. And under the leadership of Ernestine Carreira, it was introduced also literature as an issue of these seminars, because we are much more working just with history, and now literature was also very well presented. And then in 2013 we came back here to Delhi. It was the last great organization of Lotika Varadarajan. She was always very enthusiastic with all the people, and I should say that most of the now almost seniors that younger than us came as juniors here 12 years ago. They now all of them they were doing a PhD at that time, and now they are scholars with PhD that are leading research, and that so it was a movement again of renovation. This is 1994. On the left, you see in the middle Ernestine Carreira.
João Paulo.
And then you see in the same row we have the bar of Sanjay Subramaniam, and three persons. Then is my younger brother when I was 30. But it was so. I'm in the middle. I'm in the middle beyond Fado Correia Afonso and Ambassador João Deus Ramos. So coming to the end quickly, what? If we could do every 2 years in the 90s, then we had a very difficult. We were almost in a crisis, and we thought that these last 12 years were the most difficult, because those fundings didn't exist anymore, and the way how we academics can spend money changed also, and so we cannot invite people. I cannot offer a dinner to a person with my state money nowadays. And so we took time to understand how to deal, and how to deal is that because now it's different. We have just to say we are organizing. Who wants to come? We choose, okay. And then it's my own center that must pay me to be here. And then it took a certain time, and we had a great wish to go to Africa. And so in 2018, finally we were able to do it in Mozambique, Island. It was a very interesting, with the same idea that today to do it in the regional areas. And finally. Then it came COVID, and with COVID we have to stop. And finally we are able to start again last year here in Goa. For me it was very important as what we achieved. So we are looking again to new communities of students that we are emphasizing. So, and then finally to say that in a certain evolution also, for the first time we had a several number of presentations that were from the Hindu community of Goa. That was because at the beginning we were looking much more to the 16th and 17th centuries, and now we are doing all the until today and until yesterday, and so it's very important, because I think that it was a new great step. We expect to do another one in January 27 in Lisbon about the memories of the Estado da Índia, and we expect to go back to Cochin 40 years after the first in Cochin in 2029, but that is Ernestine who is going to close.
Yes.
They are giving us more 5, 6 minutes.
Okay. In fact, the problem today is to think the future of that seminars. Of course, we organize seminars every 2, 3 years, 4 years, 6 years with COVID, but it's very good. It's time to organize, and we have so many time to organize things, but it's a long time between 2 meetings. For example, in Goa, the last one we organized in 2024, and the last one it was in 2003. And it doesn't create the conditions to have new generations of historians, and especially juniors. And it was, of course, we want to organize in the future all with the same model, but we have to think in the new generations, in the juniors, and that's why in this year we are trying a new model, a second model. We have first the meetings, all the 3-4 years, the international meetings, but we have no seminars for juniors. We are beginning next week, and if it is working, of course, we'd like to have 1 or 2 by here, in Europa or in India, in hybrid or in presential is not the problem. But the idea is that the seniors share the methodology, the knowledge with the new generations and create a new generation. Because in Goa and in Bombay, for example, we have not enough young researchers, especially in master or in doctorate. And for us, it's really, we are worried with that. We need really to think in the future of younger generations. And the third project is a project of digital memory. Because the problem of 50 years of production is the transmission of that memory. And normally, of course, we publish in paper, but exemplars are 300, 400 exemplars. It's not enough to diffusion. And for example, I have not the exemplar of the seminar of Delhi in 2018. And the idea is to digitalize. We have finished to digitalize, and in December next month, all that archive of research will be online, accessible for all scholars and researchers. And we'd like, after that, put online the library, the archives of old members, as Lotika Varadarajan. We can't access today to the publications, for example, of Lotika, of Mrs. Bouchon, etc. And it's a big project of future. And I think it's all. After we can discuss about that. And just to present you the team of 2005, we are working since 4 years. We prepared the seminar of 2024. We prepared all of that projects together, and they are not today here, but Monica Reich is not our webmaster, and she works about sites and all the part of communication. Fatima Gracias is the chief member in Goa. She organizes all the operations, the scientific operations in Goa, and João Paulo and myself, we are organizing the scientific production in Europa.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this presentation. It is a remarkable project, right? It's because of its longevity, right? It's so rare to have something that lasts almost 50 years, isn't it? And so I would like you to open a discussion to see if you have some questions to both professors. Yes.
Thank you very much. That was so enlightening and such a reassuring, sort of method of approaching the whole issue. And the last 2 points that you raised, one, of course, of infusing younger researchers into this area, extremely important. Yeah, and I also speak from the experience of having worked on digital humanities. And I think that what you are doing in the digitization of your archives only, I found we produced a book called Performing Shakespeare in India. I'm just giving you an example. First a publication 2016, and then we updated it into 2024, including other areas like Manipur in India and so on, Manipur Shakespeare, etc. My only point is, and I'm sure you must have considered it, please stop me if you have, I just wanted to suggest that if you float projects in the universities, which you must have, on Indo-Portuguese links, then one of the archives that you can form digitally is to take what they have found in this whole historiography or in their own research at the local levels. For instance, in the Malabar or so on, and digitize that there, and then include it in your big project. So there has to be a project director, right? And these things then, you sort of ramify it and then bring it back together under one single project. It's just a suggestion. You must have considered it, but this is what we did with Shakespeare. This is what Jadavpur University, Calcutta has done with Shakespeare. Punjab University did with Shakespeare. So we were surprised to learn that there was a Lahore Shakespeare, and there was, Pakistan Shakespeare, etc. And the neighborhood can be also incorporated in that, because that is the advantage of digital humanities, that you can, you transcend time and space both, and you also optimize personnel. The only thing that they would need in this space, in the South Asian space, would perhaps be equipment and connectivity. So those are the challenges that we have talked about in our book on Shakespeare. But I think that it could so easily be mapped onto the kind of work that you have initiated and have so successfully conducted over 50 years. This is a suggestion. Thank you for your patience.
No, I don't know if you want to make any comments.
The idea is to have many collaborations in all universities, of course. It's collaborations of archives of researchers. It is very important today, but with Indo-Portuguese history, we need to have digitalization of archives because it's a project we are thinking, but it's not. We have not built in. It's because the archives of Goa and other archives today are in a very bad state. And many of us, especially all researchers, have reproductions, microfilms or transcriptions, etc. And we need that for young researchers, because if you go to Goa, it's sometimes impossible to read it. Goa, Bombay is the same problem, because the library of the Eras Institute today disappeared. One part is in Patriarcha, one other part is in Pune, etc. And really, we have problem with that. We need a place where to have an offer of archives for the young researchers. We have that for Brazil, with the biggest Resgate project. We digitalized the 4 million documents about colonial Brazil. We did that with Macau. We did that with Mozambique, but never with India. Indian archives in France, in Portugal, and in Goa are not catalogued and not accessible. And that is I think the big problem, and that's why we have not a lot of young researchers.
We are continuing with the suggestion, just pushing it one more point. For instance, yesterday, Mr. Debashish Mitra raised the question of Orissa and the Portuguese. Now, here is a very ripe local project where young researchers and even the Shakespeare project or any digital humanities actually runs on the strength of student researchers, because they are the ones who go out, collect the material, and then also put it down electronically and uplink it. And then, the project director, of course, okays it. So it has to involve young researchers. So I think it's a kind of, two-pronged approach to the problem that you are suggesting of having younger researchers and also digitizing in this. Yes, Indian digital archives are practically non-existent, but the government of India had something when I discovered. So one could go back, and there's a lot of stuff happening, but you're right about the shape of the archives, the interest in it, the availability, accessibility, etc. So yeah, but this is something that I wanted to share, so that if you're looking at newer areas, maybe a very modest local engagement with the youth in the universities to evolve this over a period of time could be possible, I feel. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any comments? No. It's do you have any other question? We are going into the tea break, but I think the discussion is still young. Yes. We can lose 5 minutes of coffee over a nice conversation, right?
Well, as this also relates to digitization. As research students, we benefited immensely from a series called Mare Luso Indicum. Yesterday and today I was trying to look for that, any reference to that. So I wanted to know, where does that figure? It carried seminal essays by Denis Lombard, who is mentioned today, and also Jean Aubin, who was mentioned yesterday. On Diu, on Hormuz, very little known for us at that time, based both on Portuguese and Persian material, because they could read both. So one question is, how does this series figure in the overall project?
Yeah, we had a problem with that Mare Luso Indicum Filmothèque. We have whole reviews of the, João Paulo speaks better than me, the reviews of 80s and 90s were digitalized and published with CD-ROM. The problem is the problem of digital archives. We can't today read them again. We have to do everything again.
But of course, that journal you mentioned is seminal.
It's seminal, and there is only one place in Delhi, a Jesuit library, where we could find.
Okay.
So we would travel from Aligarh to Delhi, spend the day in that, and read. And I don't think photocopying was available at that time. Took notes. So it would be lovely to have these journals in digital format or reprints for our researchers too.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any other question, or shall we go to the break? No other questions, so thank you so much again. We will be back at noon for the third session, the Mughal-Portuguese relations, okay? Noon. Thank you.